The world of work is quietly collapsing. If you've been following social media posts and news headlines recently, there seems to be a generalized panic over the job market.
My parents will never understand that this is the only way to get a job.
Everyone I know is anxious about work, whether it's about finding a job with good conditions or doing something meaningful or finding any job at all. Degrees don't guarantee stability anymore. Meanwhile, automation keeps replacing entry-level jobs. More and more generations, and particularly Gen Z, are getting disappointed about the way things work. They no longer believe that following your passion and getting a degree can get actual stability in your life.
I'm 26 years old and I have no idea what I want to do with my life. I want to be very transparent. I rarely ever post these to the internet, so if you are seeing this, welcome to my inner thoughts.
And all of this is also accompanied by mass layoffs and general uncertainty. But what if I told you that all of these trends are not purely negative, and it's not only a crisis, but also an invitation to rethink what work is for and what it means for us. Our generation was raised to chase careers, and that means that for a lot of us, facing the stillness of unemployment is unbearable. But the beautiful thing about this is that it forces you to question who you are without a job title. Over the last few years, a quiet panic has taken over a lot of young workers. Suddenly, a lot of people are realizing that degrees no longer guarantee stability. The so-called job apocalypse has made its way from clickbait headlines to lived experience for many of us. A plethora of people in the past years faced mass layoffs, firms cut entry-level jobs, AI automation is replacing interns or making the job application experience completely unbearable for both sides. And even people with spotless resumes end up sending hundreds of applications to get an interview. The way Gen Z was socialized is that work was supposed to be a ladder out of uncertainty and precarity. Yet the promises that shaped our parents' lives no longer hold. You can no longer be guaranteed that if you study hard and choose a relevant degree, you will get a good job. The British Standards Institution recently warned that Gen Z faces a job apocalypse as companies rely on AI instead of hiring graduates. 41% of firms admit to using automation to reduce headcount. Nearly a third say they now consider AI before human hires. And the result is that there's an entire generation that feels like they did everything right, yet they still feel lost. And I know that feeling very well, which is why I was also inspired to make this video, because I've thought a lot about this. Throughout my life, I've had a lot of jobs, but my first proper office job out of my master's was something I did not particularly like and something that I was forced to accept because of lack of time and need for visa and financial stability. So when it was time to leave that job, at first I was incredibly excited. I was finally free from doing something that I did not like at all and felt like I could finally start working on projects that I was passionate about, that would fulfill me, and also find a job that I would really like finally. But the reality was quite different, because after having some kind of structure throughout my entire life due to school, university, and a company that I worked at, I always had a little hat on my head that told me who I was and fulfilled my need for identity. But suddenly, stepping into unemployment, I no longer had a hat. Suddenly, I lost a sense of direction and an anchor in my life. And I'm not going to lie, the first moment when it hit me, it was very difficult and I stepped into depression, which is quite common in that situation for a lot of people. But with time, that collapse gave me an unexpected kind of clarity. For the first time in my life, I was forced to ask myself something that I never really had time for. What do I actually want to do with my time on Earth? And that question, though it was born from anxiety, felt strangely liberating. It was finally a question that came from my own self, rather than from societal expectations, from university guidelines, or company mission. And I think this clearly reflects how beneath this economic crisis there's something deeper, a cultural shift in regards to what work actually means for us. With the rise of capitalism and the omnipresence of the corporate environment, we rarely have time to really consider what we actually want for ourselves in our lives and what we want to strive for. A lot of people rarely get to question how their work can satisfy their creativity and their sense of social purpose, and what's left of their self when their job title disappears. I came across this really good essay on Substack called "Everyone I Know is Worried About Work." And it describes how career anxiety has become universal. Everyone fears losing their job or fears the job will lose meaning before they do. She writes, but this time feels different. The people with the kinds of career paths that I have often chided myself for not taking also seem anxious about their jobs. Going on LinkedIn requires a serious form of mental preparation for the increasingly desperate posts you will find there. The creative person's reassuring fallback option of getting a real, aka boring job is no longer there because, as the viral piece about the career prospects of Gen X creatives puts it, even the sellout move is in freefall. One Gen Z writer put it even more bluntly. Why are there no flipping jobs? I hate that I have to say flipping. Like many of my generation, I was told that a career would give me a sense of security, purpose, and stability. But as the author of this another essay that is really interesting on the topic called "What is Meaningful Work?" writes, these promises no longer hold for our generation. The most important lesson I've learned about work is that no company is going to save you. This isn't a reflection of any employer, but simply the market, which prevails every time. I've been fortunate enough to work at some amazing companies, but that doesn't change the fact that we're collectively reaching the upper limits of a system that is obsessed with growth at all costs. This pressure cooker environment has made us feel like if we just work hard enough and long enough, that we will be saved. It is folly. So there's indeed this general anxiety over the job situation worldwide, especially for Gen Z. But is it reflected in data? Let's take a look. So as I mentioned before, the study by the British Standards Institution shows clearly that firms around the globe are increasingly employing AI instead of entry-level employees to fulfill certain tasks. A substantial amount of business executives even mentioned that they always consider AI before hiring people. So what do the statistics actually show? The International Labour Organization major agencies report global unemployment rate at around 5% in 2024-2025, and projections put it close to that level across 2025, which is relatively low headline rate, but there are of course deep regional and demographic differences. And specifically regarding the topic of today's video, youth unemployment in particular is much higher worldwide, standing at around 11%. For example, if we look at OECD countries, the average unemployment rate has been hovering around 4-5%, but again, it fully masks youth gaps and precarity. But even though the official numbers are stable, they don't take into account all the different nuances, like people working insecurely, people not counting because they've stopped seeking work, informal sectors. And overall, behind the official data, there's a clear structural shift that everyone seems to be panicking about. The idea that younger workers seem to be more exposed to precarity now than before. We are indeed going through hard times. This video is filmed in 2025 and oh boy, we've been through a lot. The pandemic, all the wars, the climate crisis, the recession, the AI automation. We have plenty of stuff to worry about. But the thing is that humanity has been going through such crisis non-stop since time immemorial. We don't even have to go that far back. The 20th century has been full of wars, world wars, and countless crises that shook up the generations living at that time as well. But what we also can see from history is that such disruptions often lead to periods of innovation and forced reflection leading to transformation. So, for example, after World War II, huge dislocations coincided with large social reforms, like the establishment of welfare states, public health infrastructures, many cultural shifts and revolutions, decolonization, and many other positive changes. Or let's take the Great Depression of the 1930s, which forced writers, thinkers, and communities to reassess what progress meant for them. And a lot of masterpieces came out around that time. And there's even academic evidence to this. For example, there's this really fun study that shows that unemployment rates predict emotional changes in popular music lyrics over decades, which means that society's mood and general culture respond to job markets, which is part of a bigger pattern where economic strain often becomes the reason for new creative ways of expression. And pop culture also nowadays is full of liminal unemployed figures dwelling on the meaning of life and work. There are movies like Free Time or the book The Death of a Salesman. Then also what comes to my mind are the different stories of famous writers and poets and artists that talked about their periods of precarity in their work, like The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I mean, it's not a very inspiring and positive story, but it still shows that moments of stillness can prompt you to write great masterpieces like The Bell Jar, one of my favorite books. I'm sorry for mentioning this, but J.K. Rowling, she's a very controversial figure, and sometimes I don't understand her. But she also talked about how she wrote the early drafts of Harry Potter when she was extremely poor, and now she's like, the richest woman in the UK maybe? And most importantly, a celebrated author. Well, I don't know if she's widely celebrated anymore. Oh my god. That's a whole another topic. I'm not gonna get into it. I don't know why I even brought up J.K. Rowling. And there are so many other examples that maybe you can also write down in the comments below. But it does show that unemployment can be the beginning of something new and deeper and more fulfilling rather than just the end, which we often feel like in the moment. Ain't it fun? So while it's absolutely crucial to recognize the structural issues, which is AI, automation, precarious work, generational inequality, we should also encourage the view and the understanding that periods of precarity and unemployment can be a start of something beautiful, a period of self-exploration, learning and understanding what you're here for on this earth. So in a way, the structural issues don't fully erase personal possibilities. Rather than disempowering someone, they can give a new strength and new meaning through changing the shape of what we're looking for. It's clearly a very important social and economic problem, but also a very rare personal opportunity to recalibrate. As I mentioned before, stepping into unemployment at the beginning of this year, I never really had free time in my life. It was always school, exams, universities, exams, working part-time, and then starting immediately the full-time, my first official full-time job. I never really had time to reconnect with myself. For a long time, I thought I was not creative at all because for a lot of us, the way we're raised to think about creativity is that it has to be something that you can make money off of. But in reality, it comes in so many ways, and it's just something essential to feel happy and complete. That's what I realized during my unemployment. I did a lot of reflection, a lot of thoughts. As Nobel laureate James Watson once said, it is necessary to be slightly underemployed if you are to do something significant. And I love this quote. It's no secret that creativity depends on still unpressured time. We need the wandering mind and daydreaming to really come up with something innovative and interesting. We need to be able to waste a few hours to relax, to really hear ourselves and what we have to say. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin describes this scientifically in The Organized Mind. According to him, the brain alternates between a task positive mode, focused work, and a task negative mode, daydreaming. That second state, daydreaming, is responsible for our moments of greatest creativity and insight. I think it's also similar in a way to how, also for personal peace and stability, one needs to go on walks and spend time without the phone and without consuming media, because only in those moments of silence where there's no distraction can you actually get in touch with yourself. And what's really interesting is that modern culture a lot of the times despises idle time. As essayist Tim Kreider wrote in the New York Times essay, The Busy Trap, you've probably had to listen to a lot of people tell you how busy they are. It's become the default response when you ask anyone how they're doing. Busy, so busy, crazy busy. It is pretty obviously a boast disguised as a complaint. And the stock response is a kind of congratulation. That's a good problem to have, or better than the opposite. It's somehow become a badge of honor to be busy and to constantly be doing something. And even though it's wonderful to have things to do, it can also be dangerous because it distracts us from very important time of reflection. This positive cultural perception of busyness can be one of the barriers to fully surrendering into idleness. Is that a word, idleness? Yes, I think. I noticed in this past year, for the first time in my life, that I, for once, had time to feel bored. And that's when, all the fun things happen. Ain't it fun? And as an avid critic of capitalism, I have to quickly talk about it. The sociologist Kathy Wicks in The Problem with Work wrote that the notion of work ethic is not a moral truth, but a political technology. This was created as an ideology that would keep people compliant. And this is certainly something that a lot of us grew up with, attributing so much importance to work ethic, working hard, being a hard worker. And now a lot of us are asking, working hard for what? Or for whom? Philosopher Byung-Chul Han in The Burnout Society argued that late capitalism no longer disciplines us through external bosses. It convinces us to exploit ourselves. We become both master and the servant for the sake of capitalist grind, measuring our worth in productivity metrics we ourselves invented. And when you step into unemployment, this is when this ideology is cracked, because it reveals how deeply our identities depend on these systems that really have no stake in our well-being. And of course, there are consequences. There are a lot of studies, for example, this 2022 study in the European Journal of Work and Organizational Psychology that confirmed that there is a negative link between unemployment and life satisfaction. But it's also true that constant overemployment is negative as well. It can erode mental health in subtler ways, like eliminating the cognitive rest that we need for creativity, empathy, and political thought, subjecting us to stress and work-related anxiety. So we really have to keep in mind both sides when we talk about one or the other. Ain't it fun? In order not to talk only about theory, I thought I would gather a few ways to connect with that stillness inside us. One great way to do that would be to take little breaks without any devices or any distraction, where you're completely alone with your thoughts. And it can be maybe once a day you go for a walk in the morning for an hour and you don't take your phone and you don't have music in your ears, or you take 3 5-minute breaks throughout the day, again with no phone, no devices, letting the mind be idle and just wander wherever it goes. I found this personally very useful. I have this ritual of going, especially on Saturday mornings, to this park near my place, and I always leave my phone at home and just take my journal. I sit there, look at the water, the swans. If something comes to my mind, I write it down. And if not, I just let myself be still for some time. And I've had some of the best realizations while doing that. Then there's another method, which is called the 90-30 creative block. So once a week, you spend 90 minutes on a project that solves nothing and really also doesn't earn anything for you. It can be writing or drawing or tinkering something. When you're being creative, it's really special, but it's even more special when there's a group of people with you that are being creative with you. And this kind of leads me to the next practice, which intends to strengthen cooperation and learn through other people and get inspired by other people. So once a week for, let's say, 1 hour, you can organize with friends or neighbors this gathering where you exchange skills with each other. It can be cooking or coding or childcare, depending on where you are in your life, and it has to be absolutely free, just some time for people to exchange skills and again be creative together. And I couldn't not include a point about advocating for more structural change, because that's a huge part of the problem as well. So for example, if you're already working, you can participate or organize and start a trade union to advocate for predictable rest, like 4-day work week, paid sabbaticals, research time. I strongly believe that reduced work hours have to be in the future for all of us to guarantee civic life and flourish as a society. All the small interruptions and small practices accumulate, and they might lead to something bigger. So we're indeed going through a generational crisis. The collapse of the career myth, such structural challenges as AI, automation, recessions, and rising inequality. And yet I also see a strange but very hopeful opening within this entire chaos. Periods of unemployment, whether they are voluntary or not, do have this potential of becoming spaces of reflection and self-discovery. It does not absolutely erase the structural crisis that our generation is facing, but I think it's very important for all of us to remain positive and hopeful in the face of this kind of crisis. And history shows that every economic downturn and cultural shift and industrial transformations, they all produce new cultural forms and new definitions of work. When we finally realize that the system is no longer pretending to protect us, we can finally step up to save ourselves through reflection, creativity, cooperation with people around us, and the radical act of imagining what life could be beyond the traditional 9 to 5. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching it. I hope you enjoyed it. I really want to know your thoughts on this. It was definitely a burning topic for me. And after a long break, I think a 1-month break of making videos on YouTube, I thought that this would be an appropriate topic to talk about, because it's just something I've reflected on a lot. So yeah, thank you so much for watching the video, and see you in the next one. Bye!